happen intentionally, just subconscious. Like Prague has definitely not been in the greatest form from what we've seen so far, but at the same time, he's demonstrated some amazing resourcefulness in those games. You don't get the positions that Prague did in this event and also have a perfect score without being an incredibly resourceful player. Yes, you could say maybe a little bit fortunate at times, but you can't ever say that it was all luck or anything like that. So while he's demonstrated some things that his fans can be nervous about, there's also a few good things as well. And while his level may have been lower, maybe against lower rated opposition, he also has the capability to just elevate himself when he's playing a stronger player. So I don't think just because he's had those shaky moments early on that we have any reason to believe that he's not going to be playing up to his level against Sindarov right here.
For sure. The thought and the psychology involved with playing low-rated players when you have to win is completely different than playing your rivals, where you can feel more relaxed because your job is to play the best moves possible against them, and you're not forced to necessarily win like we have a game here. So Prague's level, not too worried about it versus the top guys. But what we have here is a bit interesting because after bishop e3, we could get some positions that are a little similar to some open Spanishes, where black often has a knight on e4. A thing to look out for here is white would eventually like to play f3, free up that light squared bishop on c2, the diagonal, and maybe put pressure. Maybe the queen goes to d3 when you can get it, or you play f3. Eventually you want to bring your knight to g3 and then to f5, because black's two bishops are on the queen side, and so there's a bit of an imbalance where if white can generate counterplay on the king side, white has more pieces that are attacking. The two bishops for white both look towards the king side. The knight has an ability on f1 to join the game, h2 to g4 or g3 to f5 or h5, queen can go to g4. So this is going to be double-edged, and black, on the other hand, has a bit of presence in the center and on the queen side. They have a 4-on-3 majority on the queen side, which means black has more space, and you see the bishops lined up on b7 and b6, ready to maybe push forward. So who can get there first? Who can dictate the pace? That will probably determine even the clock situation a little bit. But we see early on that Prague is actually down a couple minutes on the clock, trying to figure out what's the best way to press here.
An interesting decision, and definitely one that makes me excited for where this game is going to go, the direction, because we've just seen Prague with the white pieces give up the light squared bishop for the knight, and immediately handing over the bishop pair to Sindarov. You see those very strong bishops, b6 and b7. However, they're both kind of blocked by their own pawns. The pawn on e4, while it's strong and while you have great control of the light squares, it's also blocking the bishop on b7. Same thing with the pawn on c5 with the bishop on b6. And after giving up the bishop for the knight, we saw this great move, queen to g4. The threat is bishop captures h6 with the pin on the king. That's why we saw queen c8 from Sindarov. But it's a really interesting idea to give away the bishop like that and say, look, I know the bishop pair is a pretty serious advantage, but just looking at the position, maybe white can play queen g3, knight h2 to g4, activate that way, and wow, b4 played. This is looking pretty spicy.
It's looking pretty spicy. I already see a bit of an idea here that Sindarov is playing fast and building up a lead. And where that plays a factor is if Prague is committed to attacking takes time and energy. And even though you might get yourself in a good position to attack, you have to follow through. And when you're low on time, that makes it very difficult. So Prague, maybe correctly, has realized this is actually a pretty significant time disadvantage. By going b4, he still has ideas to press. He's pinning the pawn. He's allowing a queen exchange, but he takes away a lot of the risk in the position. Because when you go queen g3 and commit to this knight, h2, knight g4 idea, you're committed to the attack. You're giving black some time to maybe open up on the queen side and get those bishops. It's more double-edged. It's more like, hey, I'm keeping the queens on and giving you time because I really want to attack. And Prague does not want to fully commit to that because at the end of the day, he probably feels like, yeah, I might have some attacking chances, but I'm not going to go all out for that. And maybe he's still trying to find his form. He doesn't feel like this position is really one that he can go all out against versus Sindarov. So he's keeping options open. Yes, we can attack if black chooses to trade queens, but if black doesn't, or even if black does, I have liquidated material on the queen side, and if that continues to happen, there should not be any losing chances.
Right. And a bit of a relationship between the two dark square bishops is developing. The c pawn is actually pinned, and there's maybe some position that if the dark square bishops exchange, that white could try to be slightly better with the knight against the bishop. I don't really believe in that, but what I do believe in is what I can see on the board. The fact that the pin of that c pawn is actually could be really, really impactful in this game. Question mark on this move, but I fully understand it. Knight's coming to b3 next, and the goal is, hey, you go ahead and maybe take my e pawn, but I want to get the c pawn as well. Even if it's an opposite bishop position, rook takes e5, knight c4. Even if it's opposite bishops, I like what's happening for Praggnanandhaa. I like his chances here.
Yeah, I just think it's practical because I don't think he has losing chances. When people talk about the bishop pair, that's an open position. Bishops also thrive when there's pawns on both sides of the board. As the queen side begins to liquidate, the bishop pair isn't necessarily strong. The queens are off, so you don't have to worry about some endgame where the bishops can kind of hit both sides of the board. Yeah, I just don't think the tournament situation really requires that. The knight goes to c4. There's positions where it's opposite bishops, but maybe one side's a bit better. And I think just Prague, when you have white, you're playing against someone you respect and is very dangerous. 2 result position. That's what the players like. Like, hey, I can press this. I can press this for a long time. If it doesn't work, I can still settle for a draw. And none of these positions we're seeing in front of us are positions where if Prague gets down to like 2 minutes or 1 minute, I mean, 1 minute's a bit scary, but that he is still within range of liquidating to a draw and endgame. And we might even see that now. He hasn't stepped over the barrier where it's like Sindarov can all of a sudden switch gears and be like, okay, you're low on time. I'm not going to let you draw and trade everything off. No, we're still within that range. Opposite bishops are being offered right now if white wants. Both taking on e5 or playing knight d6. And yeah, so no risk for Prague yet, and I don't think that's necessary. These players are both on 4-4, right? So with a draw, they move to 4.5, and that probably means they only need 1 out of 2, because 5.5 is usually the qualification score in the final 2 games. So again, not really a situation where maybe irrational decisions need to be made based on tournament situation. But with knight b6, Amon, that means you're in some position. c4 is the threat. F5 is the move for black that will make this crazy. F5, G5, F4, get counterplay. You know what the key piece is? Sindarov won a game already against Keimer. The bishop on E3. Look at this bishop. It's anchored in by the pawn on F2. It blocks the pawn on E4, which prevents black's light squared bishop from attacking G2. It supports C5. You need to destabilize this bishop on E3. Doesn't matter if he's trying to play for a draw or win. Sindarov, that bishop on e3 is the glue in white's position, and it's time to try to kick that away with black's 4 pawns versus white's 3 on the king side. That's going to be forcing. And we see a trick now, Amon. If c6, rook takes c6 is playable because of rook d1 checkmate at the end.
I like that. That's important to keep in mind. And honestly, easy to just like miss that in the moment. But these guys are so locked in. Looking at the time now, I'm a little concerned about Prague's position. He kind of has to be careful, because look at the black king. King f7, king e6, king d5. It has a perfect carved path right to the center of the board. And what will follow is bishop to d4. And then that c-pawn is, there's no way that you can keep defending it.
Yeah, rook d1 to prevent the king from going to d5, because when the king goes to d5, black plants the bishop on d4 and controls so many squares. This move, Prague is in bailout mode. He knows he's not winning this. He's low on time. Trade everything off. You don't mind losing your c-pawn if you can win one of black's other pawns. There's no more play left in this position for white. Black's king has joined the game, and I do expect to see a draw shortly.
Yeah, the pawn on c5 is, it's going to fall, but what's going to happen after everything exchanges here is white's going to go collect all of the pawns. The corner here is by stalemate, which is not something we see as our tournament leaders. They move up to 4.5 each, and as you mentioned, Eric, one more win for both of them takes them to that promised land of 5.5 points.